Hello everyone, how are you? Today, World Talent Economy Forum actually come up with another uh, talent guy. He is Mr. Bryan, and he has very interesting activities with AI, artificial intelligence, and the training, and many interesting things. If you saw his actually social media activities, this is also very interesting. So, hello, how are you, sir?
I'm fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you. So, can you please introduce yourself with our audience?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Bryan Talebi. I am the CEO and founder of Ahura AI. And what we do is we use artificial intelligence and massive data sets to enable people to learn 3 to 5 times faster than traditional education.
Mhm. Okay, this is very interesting. Even in our World Talent Economy Forum, we bring many experts from this industry, AI, and these related things. And there is a little bit of debate in between the human resources and AI. What do you think actually? What will happen when even in this present pandemic situation? How it works? What are your observation?
Absolutely. So we're in the middle of a profound change in the world. We're in the middle of what's called the fourth industrial revolution, where it's expected that over 49 million jobs in the United States and over 1 to 1.5 billion jobs globally will be replaced by artificial intelligence. So there's going to be two waves of this. The first is anything that requires repetitive manual labor, and the second wave includes anything that requires repetitive cognitive labor. So by repetitive manual labor, I mean anything like driving trucks or taxis for logistics, or people who work at restaurants or fast food establishments, retail, things like that, right? So anything where people are essentially training their manual labor for money, and it's something that they do over and over again. Now, that second wave is going to be really interesting because it's also going to include all the repetitive cognitive labor. So, accountants, many kinds of doctors, including radiologists and the surgeons. You're talking about many lawyers. So, whereas with the repetitive manual labor, which is 1.2, 1.5 billion jobs around the world, includes a lot of people who didn't go to college, barely made it through high school, and haven't been upskilled in a long period of time. The second wave is going to include people that did everything right. They went to college, they got post grad degrees, they continue to upskill and learn some very profound things, and yet they're going to be replaced by artificial intelligence because at the end of the day, computers can do a lot of this work a lot faster and for much less expensive because they don't have to go to the bathroom. They don't have to stop for lunch. They don't have to only work for 8 hours. They can work 24 hours a day. And they never have to worry about suing their employer or, having the wrong behavior or anything like that, which means that we as a human family have to figure out how are we going to replace those jobs. Because look, Sharif, I'm a student of history. And if we look back to the previous three industrial revolutions that impacted the human race, each time we were able to find new jobs for people to do and even more new jobs for people to do. And yet, the difference here is in the previous three industrial revolutions, we had somewhere between 1 to 2 generations to retrain the population for the jobs of the future. So it wouldn't be that individual, it'd be their children or their grandchildren that would suddenly have to learn new skill sets. This time around, we have 5 to 10 years, which means those specific individuals who are impacted have to radically transform their knowledge base. So that's the first part of the question you asked, and apologize for the long answer. The second question is, under this new paradigm of COVID, this has exacerbated this issue and caused it to go even faster because with many places in the world, a lot of people can't go into the office anymore as a result of COVID. And of course, we here in the United States have dealt with COVID much more poorly than many other parts of the world. And so those people that can't go into work suddenly their jobs are being replaced much more quickly than they had anticipated. And so there are many jobs in the United States, about 40.7 million jobs got wiped out. And many of those people are not going to go back to work after COVID blows over because many of those companies have already found new solutions to get that same job done without those individuals coming into the office.
Before I go to the next question, I just want to know, is like Rohan from your team, he want to join with you, or he's observing
I
as
think he
your
wants to
team?
watch. Yeah.
Okay. He can go to the, watch through your Facebook Live and everything. So anyway, dear audience,
Okay.
if you want to watch his show, definitely you can watch from his Facebook walls, and this definitely many interesting things you will get from us and our guest. So anyway, I have a one specific question right now. Many of the actually people, they are losing their job for the COVID-19, especially developing nations in Asia. Many people actually losing their jobs. So in that situations, actually, what the solution you have right now? Like I know many of the people regularly calling me. They said, "I'm losing my jobs. This problem, that problem. Many of the challenging situation." But what's the benefit of like AI right now, and how we can save this huge amount of people?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I'm going to take a step back before answering that question and talk about something more broad, and then I'll get to the specific context of your question. So the more broad question is, how do people learn? And it turns out that there are 40 years of data on this, that there are many universities from the United States and around the world who have studied this. And it turns out that personalization is key. If you can personalize the information that you're conveying to someone, say through a private tutor or a one-to-one instructor, the people learn significantly faster and their learning outcomes are significantly better. Now, the problem, of course, is it's extremely difficult to have one half of the population teach the other half of the population, right? That's just not
Mhm.
scalable. But that's why many schools try to have smaller classrooms, and they try to find ways to decrease the ratio between teacher and student, with the optimal being one-to-one. Now, artificial intelligence allows us to do that. So, going to your specific question of how do you actually retrain such a large population? Well, the answer isn't to go back to what failed the first time around, because many of these people who have repetitive manual labor type of jobs, who didn't go to college, who didn't make it through high school, they already went through the traditional educational approach and that didn't work. And the reason for that is the traditional educational approach works for certain subsets of the population who have certain learning styles that enable them to effectively learn under those situations. But most people need to be taught in a slightly different way based on their own personal, unique needs in that moment. And if you talk to any teacher, most of them will say that when they go to a classroom, they know for all the different kids exactly what that person needs. But because they have 30 students in their classroom, or for professors in universities, especially here in the United States, sometimes 100 students, it's just not possible to give that kind of individual attention to everybody. And so with artificial intelligence, you can actually do that. And the way that we do it at Ahura AI is we collect over 10,000 biometric data points every second. And we've been able to create a convolutional neural network that takes all of that data that we collect on a second to second basis to identify the optimal way to deliver content to that individual in real time, which enables them to learn much more quickly. They pay attention much more. And of course, they retain that information longer.
Very interesting. Like, you are working as a tech companies and you are giving them training and everything. Do you have any affiliations with any specific university or research centers? How are you working right now?
So yes, we when we launched our alpha, we launched it with one of the top Ivy League universities in the United States, whose name I won't mention right now. They're fantastic. They were fantastic partners, and we continue to have a great relationship with them. We have been approached by quite a few different universities, both within the United States and around the world, asking to enable them to use our technology, since so many of their students are at home right now. Now, our primary go-to-market strategy has been to sell to large corporates who use our technology to upskill their employees. And then, of course, we give away free licenses to members of underserved communities globally. But recently, because of COVID, we've been in conversations with quite a few universities and university systems, because I don't know if I'm sure you've been keeping track of this much more closely than I have. In the United States, there's a massive issue where many universities have already announced that they will not be having in-person classes in the fall of 2020 into the 2021 school year, which means that many of these students who are paying $50,000 a year to attend school are effectively sitting at home watching videos of their professors explaining the material. And they could, of course, be doing the same thing on Khan Academy or any number of other platforms for free. And so there's a question around how many students in the United States and around the world will continue to pay those enormous fees to essentially watch YouTube videos of their professors explaining material. And so the question then is, can universities incorporate advanced technology to provide a significant amount of value to their students? And so we've been approached by quite a few universities asking us to do that. And we've been building APIs to be able to work directly with whatever systems the universities have to be able to create that personalized learning environment for their students.
Very interesting. I want to move forward. Like you are operating from USA. So
That's right.
how many countries you right now and managing? How many universities you manage right now? So what country?
So we are not live in any universities right now. We have contracts with quite a few corporations. As far as which countries we're live in, so much of what we do, as I mentioned before, we sell to large corporates. And then for every license that we sell to corporates, we give away free licenses to members of underserved communities globally. Now, our corporate clients are all over the world, but we also focus on giving free licenses to women in slums in India, women in favelas in Brazil, people in refugee camps in Norway, Syria, Turkey, and other places. And we also have partnered with quite a few NGOs and governmental organizations as well, all across Africa, to provide our technology to organizations that will be able to enable those who need it to be able to leverage our technology to learn the skill sets they need to be able to then work remotely at many of these corporations to be able to generate money for themselves and their families.
Like it's very interesting and very positive response I getting from you. Besides that, I just want to know, like in this COVID-19 situations, do you face any challenges, or if you face challenge, how you try to overcome from these situations? What you want to share with our audience, because we have many corporations as well as many universities and many young entrepreneurs with us. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, this time of COVID-19 is challenging for many people, both in terms of a lot of companies struggling with revenue, as well as people struggling to work from home, because it's not only being able to get on a computer and work instead of coming into the office, it's the fact that while we're protecting ourselves physically from the virus, are we taking care of ourselves mentally and emotionally and socially? Because remember, we humans are very social creatures. When we hug someone for 9 seconds or more, we generate this additional serotonin in the brain that causes us to feel good about ourselves and feel good about life. And we need that constant interaction with other human beings. And so it's very tough for a lot of people in that capacity. Now, with Uhura specifically, fortunately for us, this hasn't been a difficult time because the world has come to realize that everything we've been saying for the past 2.5 years about the need to radically transform and improve our ability to learn online, that this is something that's happening now. And so that demand has increased significantly across the world. And we've had quite a few investors reach out to us and say they want to be on this journey with us and want to invest in our company. So for us, it's been great, but that comes with a human cost, right? I constantly am aware of all of the people who can't necessarily do their jobs from home, people who are very critical to the effective functioning of society, people that work in healthcare, nurses, doctors that constantly put themselves in harm's way. And so I think this is a very difficult time for humanity. And so we have to find ways to solve that. And again, we can use artificial intelligence to solve that as well.
Okay, this is very interesting. Before I go to the corporate world, I want to go with your some of the personal experience, because from your social media I find that from your childhood you have to take a lot of responsibility and challenges. Now step by step you are establishing yourself in the global arena. How was your journey? How you want to share this motivational aspect? Because I want that our audience at least know about your journey. Maybe
Well,
they
thank
will
you.
be motivated. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I was very fortunate. I was born in a tiny village with no running water and no electricity out in the southeastern desert of Iran. And my family, the government wanted to execute my father and the rest of my family. And so we had to escape across the border into Turkey, where we lived as refugees in a refugee camp for 2 years before getting our political asylum and coming to the United States. Now, of course, the United States welcomed us with open arms, and I'm forever grateful for that. And the reason earlier I said I was very fortunate is because suddenly I had access to the American education system. And of course, after I educated myself, opportunity to jobs. And so in middle school, I didn't really have very many friends. I was kind of a weird kid. And so I threw myself into math and science. I taught myself quantum mechanics and differential equations. I wound up writing a couple white papers that I submitted to NASA on a lark just because I wanted them to be my friends. And next thing I know, I'm working at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is one of the NASA campuses in the United States, working on the Constellation X project, focusing on the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. And so I began working there when I was 16, worked there for a number of years, and then worked on the Mars rover project for a while before starting my first company while I was in college.
Mhm.
Now, I decided that I wanted to learn how to be an entrepreneur and I wanted to run my own business. And so I built a company selling educational products to families while I was in college and immediately after. And then when I decided to move on, I founded another company that was a consulting firm that I wound up selling. So my 20s were quite interesting.
Okay, it's really positive, dear audience. Why I sharing these things with you? Because we want World Talent Economy Forum always want some positive people, because positive people they change the world. So this is the man. He come from a root levels and he trying to exploring this world. Even when I saw that he has a very strong connection, even Sir Richard Branson, many interesting figures. So can you share something? You have to understand that this man, from his background, he's exploring the world. So why not you? Definitely, there are many entrepreneurs I know. They regularly call me. I'm struggling. I have this problem. I say yes. We have some good character. Try to learn from them. So how do you want to share? Like your when you exploring, what is your mindset? How you build up your mindset? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I really appreciate that. I guess my mindset initially, every morning when I wake up, my first thought is how grateful I am to have the opportunities that I do. How grateful I am just to be alive. I'm not 6 feet under. I have my health. I have my capabilities. And so I'm just really grateful every morning. Now, I was very grateful when I was waking up and didn't know where food was going to come from. Or didn't, and wore hand-me-down clothing from my brother that we bought on the sales rack at Ames or from, garage sales. I was still thankful then as well because I had clothes, right? And so it's just a mindset. When you allow yourself to be happy and grateful, it opens so many avenues for you, because even if you're going through very challenging times, it allows you to focus on the good. And when you do that, it opens so many pathways before you that enables you to look at the positive. Look, after I sold my second company, I had a chance to go back to Iran to visit the village where I was born. And I'll never forget, because obviously in Iran, there's a lot of very large cities. It's a very industrialized country. But there are also parts in the backwoods that are not that advanced. And so that's where I was born. And so I went to visit. And even though most of my cousins are now professionals and doctors and so forth, many of the second cousins and third cousins and fourth cousins, many of the people that continue to live in this village where I was born are still shepherds. And they still are goat herders. And many of them still haven't had gotten a university education. And so when I went back to visit and ran into a lot of the people that still live in that village, it really struck home like a punch in the gut that I'm not that different from any of those people. We share a lot of genetic code. Ostensibly, we have the same IQ, and yet we live these radically different lives with different levels of opportunity. And so the reality is that any of the listeners, if they wake up and they have food in the refrigerator and they have clothes to wear and they have their health and can walk around, they are ahead of so many other people around the world. And so then the question is, how do you take the same number of seconds that each and every one of us have in a day, and how do you maximize that time? So the first part is being absolutely grateful for what you do have. The second part is thinking positively about the opportunities in front of you. Look, there's a hero mindset and a victim mindset. There's many great books about this if people want to read that. But a victim mindset states whenever anything happens, that, oh no, I am a victim of my circumstance. I'm a victim of X, Y, and Z person being mean to me or not giving me an opportunity. I'm a victim of society. I'm a victim of any number of things. And it's very easy to have a victim mentality. It's not hard. There's so many ways that you can come up with reasons that you're a victim. I was born with a clubbed foot. I was never supposed to be able to walk, much less to run, right? There's so many different things that you can use as an excuse to determine why you weren't able to achieve what you wanted to achieve. On the flip side, there's this thing called a hero mindset. And if any of your guests are not aware of the hero's journey, if you watch any movie from Hollywood or Bollywood, if you read any books, if you read any of the stories that are captivated the population of the world throughout the last 1,000 years, they follow something called the hero's journey. And necessarily in the hero's journey, when you're called to an adventure, you're called to solve a problem, you go through this circle, and much of the hero's journey has to do with all the challenges that the hero faces and all of the trials and tribulations and what they do to overcome these obstacles in their path. And so what I would recommend is, if you think of your life as a movie, if you think of yourself 50 years from now or 30 years from now or however many years from now on your deathbed, thinking about the movie that they made about your life in Hollywood or Bollywood, or the book that was written about your life, how will they describe you? How will they describe all the challenges that you face? And when you face those challenges, did you fold? Or did you step up again? Every time you fell over, did you get back up and find a way around, through, or over any obstacle that was in front of you? Because those are the stories that are fun to read. When people have obstacles and they achieve them, it's never fun to read a story or watch a movie about someone that just has everything and then continues. And I would actually venture to say that if you're born with everything and have everything, it actually is a detriment to developing the level of ambition and capability necessary to take on very large problems. Now, of course, I have a number of friends who have been born into great wealth, but they found challenges. They found things to do that they had to overcome. They had to pick something that's even higher than where they began. And my challenge to every person that's listening or watching this show is, regardless of where you started, look at what is the next challenge that you can overcome, because it's a muscle just like anything else. Overcome that challenge and find that bigger challenge behind it, and find a way, find allies, get training, overcome that challenge. Each time you get outside of your comfort zone and do something that's more difficult and more challenging, that gets you in a position where you can take on a larger and larger and larger challenge down the road.
Okay, already there is an audience response. I have my question. I will ask you. So first, audience number one. So Projapati, I don't know. I think if I do not do mistake, I think after a long time I get my friend. She is Noura Sabah Khan. I think she's like immigrant like you. Anyway, thanks for sharing, Bryan. I hear you mention about preparing new generation for the upcoming change. Could you elaborate a little more, like how do we prepare new workforce when most of the jobs will be obsolete due to the artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And so it reminds me of what a lot of people asked when we moved from a largely agrarian society, farming the land, to working in factories. Many farmers said, well, all these newfangled machines are coming out that can do the work of 100 men in a farm. What happens to the other 99 people? Well, of course, humanity is very creative. We can find things for people to do. And so we found jobs in factories, and then we found jobs in offices, and we continue to create new jobs for people. Look, we are going to invent far more jobs moving forward than the jobs that go away. The question is, how adaptable can you be? How quickly can you relearn new skill sets? Because the future is going to hold entire industries that rise up and die in, let's say, 10 years, which means you have to have an entire population that is trained to provide value in those industries before the industry goes away and is replaced by a new one. Look, the old paradigm was one that you spent the first about 18 years of your life studying and learning. Then you spent the next 40 years of your life working. And then you spent the next 20 years or 10 years when you're retired just relaxing. The reality is a new world that we live in. All three of those things need to happen simultaneously at all times. So the new generation has to learn their entire life, they work their entire life, and they relax their entire life, right? So work hard, rest harder. But what that also means is you have to continue learning. So initially, that means learning how to code using Python and Java and many of the other languages. After you learn how to code in the basic languages, learn how to code on the blockchain. There are 17 jobs for blockchain coders. I'm sorry, there's 17 jobs for every one person that has the skill sets to be able to do that. That's wild. That's a massive supply-demand misalignment, which means that people that have that skill set can command very high salaries. There are so many jobs for artificial intelligence engineers for every one person that can do that. There are so many jobs for very effective social media managers. There are many jobs for therapy. Look, right now, over the next 5 years, there's going to be a massive need for therapists of all sorts and all levels, because we're seeing massive spikes in clinical depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies around the world. And the reality is one subset of the population can afford $300 to $400 an hour for a psychotherapist or someone that has a PhD or a master's in therapy. But there's a massive population. I know here in the United States, something like 40% of our population cannot afford a surprise $400 fee, much less $400 a week, right, for therapy. And so on the one side, we have these very expensive therapists. And on the other hand, here in the United States, we have these suicide hotlines, which are essentially volunteers that are reading off of a script and walk people down from and de-escalate them from wanting to kill themselves. Now, there's a massive demand in the center for people who need someone to talk to, but potentially they can't go to their friends and tell them about their marital challenges or their challenges with their jobs or so forth, because they're worried that that friend will then go and tell everybody else in their community or their friend from church or their relatives or what have you, and they don't want that kind of story going about their friend list. And so in the past, a lot of people would go to their priest or pastor, but of course we know that the religiosity around the world has plummeted. And so there's a massive demand for people to be able to go to someone they trust, who is required legally to not share any of that information with anybody, and to be able to speak and get things off their chest. Now, people can do that remotely through telehealth and telemedicine. There's a massive need for what I call the Uber of therapy, for people to be paid $25 to $50 an hour to sit there on a video conference like we are now and be able to ask the right questions and listen to the challenges that someone has. Now, I can keep going about the type of jobs that we're going to create moving forward. There are many of them, and most of them are online. Most of them are digital. Most of them require a certain level of technical ability to be able to use a computer or many of the apps that exist on your computer to be able to be online.
Okay, very interesting. In present situation, actually, there are many challenging situations. So your concept and your work is very demanding right now. First of all, okay, you are doing work with a corporate. Even I know that many corporate people now losing their jobs. Second things, your most important thing, you are working with the underprivileged people as well. So when you work with Asia and Africa and Middle East and different countries with the underprivileged people, how it works, or how you culturally adopted with this kind of people, uh, what's the procedures? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you a couple examples. So, there's an organization called the Africa 10 Initiative, which was founded by the late former Secretary General of the United Nations, Kofi Annan, and his son, Kojo Annan, with the imperative to enable development in Africa across many countries. So, for example, we work with them. We delivered 30,000 free licenses to the Africa 10 Initiative that was then delivered or is being delivered to people in Ghana who did all the right things. They got an education, they speak English, but they just can't find a job because the youth unemployment rate in parts of Africa are extremely high. And so we enable those people to learn how to work remotely. And then also we partner with another organization that enables them to find jobs in the Western world for these corporations. And so that's generally how we do partnerships. Or we met the Norwegian Refugee Council, for example, through my friend and mentor Amit Pradhan. And so we work with these nonprofit organizations. We give blocks, we essentially give grants of licenses that we provide free of charge to them. And then generally what we do is we have applications where people can apply to get scholarships to use our technology through these nonprofit organizations. And the reason we do that is so people, often when people just get something for free and they just sign up, they don't really care about it. But if they have to show us like, hey, here's why I'm one of the 30,000 people that should have access to this, or one of the 1,000 people, or what have you, that means they actually take it very seriously. Now, we do also work with many nonprofits to provide for people that don't have access to it, especially in refugee camps and in other places, if they need a laptop to be able to access this, if they need electricity, if they need internet. We work with many nonprofits around the world to provide those resources as well, so that even a person in a village can have a solar panel that's connected to a laptop, that it gets satellite internet, that can then go online, use our platform, learn those skill sets really quickly, and then turn around and use those same resources to be able to work remotely around the world. Now, that provides a lot of value for people all across the world and for those governments as well, because suddenly they increase the number of people on their tax rolls. They're able to increase the number of productive people in their society. And I know here in the United States, that's quite compelling for many states and municipalities that have been impacted by COVID and have lost many jobs, because suddenly those people who are no longer working aren't able to pay taxes. They aren't able to go out to the local economy and purchase food and other resources. And so what happens is it's a virtuous cycle that enables both those governments and those local nonprofits to succeed, because more of their citizens are working.
One thing I just want to know, as you are working with many different developing nations, what's the industrial situation? How many industry actually adapted this AI for running their manufacturing and this kind of things? What's how you want to share this industrial
Yeah,
information?
that's a really good question. To answer that, I'm going to tell you a quick story about what happened in the 90s. So, for anybody that doesn't remember, during the 90s, in the early 90s, the internet wasn't very robust. And all you could really do is go on these chat sites. It didn't have a graphic user interface. You basically just chatted with random people. And over time, many corporations realized that as the internet flourished, that if they did have a presence on the internet, they were able to sustain a massive competitive advantage against their competitors. So they built websites, they built blogs, they marketed themselves on the internet, they showed the world what value that they could provide, whether it's from a good or a service. Today, if a corporation doesn't use the internet, they might as well not exist, right?
Yes.
If you want to do business with a company and they don't have a website, how much do you trust that company? It's a requirement. You can't not have one. And so what we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s is the companies that used the internet had a radical competitive advantage and they succeeded. There were the ones that refused to use the internet and they died. And then there was the massive group in the middle, which are the laggards, who eventually used the internet and they caught up to everybody and were able to gain some benefit. But because they were so late, they were able to stay alive, but they weren't able to grow much faster. Now, today, artificial intelligence is exactly where the internet was in the 90s, which means there are organizations, companies, countries, industries that are embracing change and saying, look, artificial intelligence is going to have a massive impact on every single part of the entire supply chain, the entire distribution network, and so forth. And there are certain companies that leverage that and are early adopters and have jumped in, and they have been sustaining massive competitive advantage. There are other companies that will say, no, 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 we're going to stay away from artificial intelligence. Indeed, there are certain countries where their leadership have said, you know, we're going to stay out of this game. There are industries that still refuse to update their processes and systems to use artificial intelligence. And look, those industries, those organizations, those countries, and those companies will suffer terribly if they choose to continue to ignore the power of artificial intelligence. Now, there will be those in the middle that will wait until everybody else is using AI and then use it, which means that they might go the way of Blockbuster, or they might, survive. But for organizations and companies to thrive, look, 10 years from now, AI will be in everything. The question is, are you going to wait? Or are you going to figure out how to leverage the power of artificial intelligence now in all of the organizations and industries? Because it's a time of profound change.
Okay, this is really interesting strategy you are sharing with us. So, but from my own personal experience, still I know many universities and that many students and young people still they are not integrated with this kind of things. And what you are saying, this is actually true. Next 10 years, everything will be cope up by the AI and this kind of things. What's your advice? What your a strategy to reach these people, or how they can reach with your company and this kind of activities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the most important skill set to develop, whether you're a young person that's just going through school now or in college, or if you're a person that's been in the workforce for 20 or 30 years and are fairly seasoned, the single most skill set that is important to develop is adaptability, is being able to continually learn, continually stay on top of what's happening with technology, continue to stay on top of the game. Because look, during the internet era, I saw so many adults say, oh, I'm just not a computer person. There are many people that refuse to learn how to type or use the internet or use Facebook or use any of these things. That's not possible anymore. When people say, I'm not a computer person, they have just said that I am not going to enter the future and I am going to stay a Luddite and stay essentially irrelevant, because you have to be a computer person now. You can't do anything without it. Commerce is moving to digital. It's already moved to digital. Human interaction has moved digital. Everything is moving to digital. And so that's the first and foremost thing that I would recommend, which is learn how to be adaptable. And a lot of that comes from just telling yourself, because the words that we use when we describe ourselves, whether it's that voice inside your head when you're talking to yourself, or when you're talking to other people and telling other people about yourself, the words that we use have a tremendous power to impact our life. And the reason for that is our brains are essentially supercomputers. And we tell our brains constantly what we want our brain to do. Now, we can, on the one hand, keep telling our brain, oh, I'm really bad at that, or I'm really bad with remembering names or faces. And look, your brain doesn't make value judgments. It just says, hey, I guess this is the input, this is the command, be bad at remembering names. And you will be. It's surprising how it works. Versus if you decide actively that you speak in powerful ways positively about yourself, you will rewire your brain. You will tell your brain new commands, and your brain will follow through. Now, it might take a little bit of time because you have to develop those muscles, just like if you suddenly decided one day you're going to wake up and run a marathon. Well, that would be quite challenging. But if you wake up one day and say, you know what, today I'm going to run 1 mile, and then you run 1 mile every day for a week, and then the second week you run 2 miles, the third week you run 3 miles, well, eventually you'll be able to run 26 miles. But it won't be that the 26 miles is suddenly so much easier or shorter or what have you. It's you will be stronger. And so the same thing happens with your brain, where when you continually work on it, continue to be more adaptable, continue to train it, you will be able to accomplish more. So that's number one. Number two, if anybody wants to use Ahura, if you're a corporation or a nonprofit, we do have a wait list that we announced in January at the World Economic Forum. We have over 200 corporations on that wait list currently that want to use our technology across their companies. And so you're welcome to go out to our website. It's www.ahuraai.com. That's AHURA.ai.com. And you can apply to join the wait list. And we will get to you, and you will be able to be an early adopter of this technology. If you are a nonprofit or a country or any other organization that wants to leverage our technology for underprivileged people, feel free to reach out either, again, through our website, or you can email me. It's BRYAN, so Bryan@ahuraai.com. And of course, if you individually want to join as well, we have a wait list for individuals as well. Right now, we haven't launched consumer product for just individuals. Right now, we're working with organizations, but you're welcome to add your name to the wait list. And when we do launch the direct-to-consumer model, you will be the first person to have access to it. So we're happy to use our technology to put it in the hands of people that want to benefit themselves and improve themselves and to learn the skill sets they need. And so I'm happy to help people with that.
Yes, yes. Thank you. This is actually very kind information you are sharing with our audience. Besides that, I just want to know, like, if our like our young generations or people, they are adopted with this kind of technology, what's the possibilities they will get new jobs or new opportunities? What's the actually future opportunity of AI? Can you share some specific information with our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is the future opportunities to work with artificial intelligence. Well, the
Yes,
most
exactly.
obvious one is to code. So be one of the people that programs artificial intelligences. Because look, there's still a lot of work left to do to effectively code AI. Another one is to train artificial intelligence. So I don't know if you're aware, but most of the algorithms for artificial intelligence have been written for the past 30, 40 years. There aren't that many new algorithms, though some people are still innovating in that space. The biggest difference between good artificial intelligence and bad artificial intelligence is the models that are used and the data that's collected, and how is that data organized and structured so the AI can learn from it effectively. And so you have some AI that has a data sets that are very monolithic, right? So famously with facial recognition software, it works significantly more effectively for white males than it does for females. And of course, it's not that effective for people that have a lot of melanin in their skin, like myself, or people that have even more melanin in their skin, like people from Africa or people that are quite darker. Part of the reason is because of the way that artificial intelligence or facial recognition software looks at your face. Part of that reason is just because initially they didn't have that many non-white people that they trained the models on. And so right now there's a huge opportunity to train these models on people for across the world. And so there will be many jobs for people to help train these artificial intelligence as well. And then the third piece of it is outside of AI, that human interaction. So the more of our industry goes to machine learning and artificial intelligence and all the different types of AI, the more that people that can do work that requires empathy or that requires that human touch and the human connection between two people, the more that will be valuable as well. But again, much of that is going to be done remotely on video conferences and through augmented reality and through virtual reality. And so that's another area. And of course, working on all the robots, right? So many technicians who've in the past worked on building cars or worked on building other machines, there's going to be a lot of new machines that will need to be serviced, that will need to be repaired, that will need to be built. And so especially if it requires a kind of critical thinking to determine what's wrong and how to fix it in a way that's not repetitive.
Okay. Besides that, I just want to know, like, what do you think is the future of globalizations? Because how we see that the present situations is horrible and many things. Yes, but I want to share one thing that Malaysia is doing very good job in COVID-19 situations. Yes, we are small compared to USA. We have 32 million people and there are only 122 deaths and 18,000 plus they are affected by COVID-19, but more or less it's under control. But my issue is that how we see the other countries, what will be the future of globalization?
Absolutely. That's a great question. And first of all, I am very impressed with how Malaysia handled the COVID-19 epidemic. They really came together and solved it in a very powerful way. So there's an interesting way. That's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking it. I think the future is going to be quite interesting when it comes to globalization, because as you've probably noticed, there are powers at work that are very anti-globalist. And this isn't just in the United States, though these tensions against globalization are quite high in the United States, but we see them also in many parts of Europe and South America and parts of Asia as well. But I see that as almost the death throes of the anti-globalization movement. It's people essentially having their backs against the wall, having a gut understanding that their world is going to change radically, and not wanting to change, because at the end of the day, a lot of people aren't terribly adaptable. They want things to stay the same. They want to go back to simpler times where it was easier to understand society and understand all the rules. But the reality is this is a runaway train that's not going back. So the world is becoming more connected each and every day. And this is a perfect example of this. I'm sitting here in Southern California in the United States in a completely different time zone, and you're interviewing me from Malaysia. And look, my schedule is 24 hours a day because I work with people all over the world, which means I have calls and video calls throughout the day and night constantly. And that's okay. That's fantastic. That's great, because it means that a person in Malaysia that creates a product or creates a program and codes something that can solve a very real problem, they don't have to only sell to the 32 million other Malaysians in their country or the people in their town like people had to do thousands of years ago. If you build a technology or build an amazing product, you can sell it to everyone around the world. And given that digitally there are no real customs, right? You don't need to ship the product across borders. You can sell it online. You can access the entire global demand pool, which is, I think, absolutely brilliant. And we're going to see this interconnection between economies, between people, between languages, more and more and more, where it just becomes a fact of life, where everybody will be doing business with everybody. And it's going to be a beautiful thing. This is something that we can't stop, even if we wanted to. And so whenever you're in a situation where there's an eventuality of something that's going to happen, it's much easier to adapt to it and say, okay, this is the way that the world is going. How do I position myself most effectively to be able to generate value for myself and other people? And so if you see a world, for example, where there is a future state that's inevitable. So let's say, for example, self-driving cars, okay? That's inevitable, no matter what. Now, the question is it going to happen in 20 years or 5 years or 2 years? And there's a lot of different questions around that. But if you know that's an inevitable end state that's going to happen, how can you position yourself to benefit from that, whether you're investing or developing your own skill sets and investing in yourself or working? And so you can use this example across any number of industries. When you sit down with yourself and say, okay, in retail or in banking or in media or any industry that you can possibly think of, what is that end state that, given the direction of globalization, what is that end state going to look like? What has to absolutely happen, because that's just the way things are going to shake down, and put yourself in that position.
Thank you. There are actually two audience response, some questions from audience. Humaira Tanjila. She said, "Hello, sir. Thank you for your time for these sessions. What will be the role of AI in primary classroom?" I think she's thinking about that, how we can train like 6 to 10 years of children's for AI. Second thing, Ankit, she is also from India. She said, "Hello, and can AI overtake human intelligence in the future?" So,
Both
yes.
of those are fantastic questions. So in primary education, both from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and by the way, with Uhura, we stay out of that. We only work with adults for the time being. Down the road, we might change. But the way I see the world is this. Look, for 300 years, the entire education system has not changed. It's stayed quite static. You have a teacher in front of 30 students, and you teach, arithmetic and mathematics and language and history and so forth. That hasn't changed in a very long time. The way I look at the world is right now, we expect way too much from teachers. And both my parents are educators. I have many friends that are educators. We expect so much from teachers. We expect them to be experts in the subject matter. We expect them to be experts at delivering the subject matter and being more compelling and more interesting than Facebook or Beyonce or Netflix. We expect them to be social workers and psychologists, and here in the United States now we expect them to be security guards as well. Look, this is not sustainable. You can't have a single person doing all those jobs. I see a world where artificial intelligence takes over some of those responsibilities and takes on which content do we deliver to whom and in a compelling way, so that the teachers in primary school and upward can focus on what they do best, which is promoting the psychosocial development of those children. So those children learn positive ways of conflict resolution. They learn how to learn together as teams and work together with other people, because throughout life, that's what you need. You need to be able to work with other people while you have the technical understanding of the world around you as well. And so AI will take on some of those loads and will take some of that workload, but the teachers will still need to be in those classrooms to support those students and their psychological growth. So that's the answer to that question. As far as the second question, which was, will artificial intelligence become smarter than human intelligence?
Yes.
Depends on who you ask. My feeling on this is that it's an eventuality that will happen. So there's this thing called the singularity. The idea being that eventually we're going to program an artificial intelligence that then can program a better version of itself. So if it takes us, for example, 40 years or 50 years to pass the Turing test, and of course we've passed the Turing test, many companies have by this point, and gone way beyond it if you look at OpenAI or you look at the work Google is doing and so forth. But so if it takes us 50 years to program an artificial intelligence that is, and I want to distinguish an AGI rather than an ANI. So an AGI is an artificial general intelligence versus an ANI, which is an artificial it's one that's much more focused on a very specific task, like being able to decipher what words that you're using or what other item you want to buy in your Amazon retail experience. So with an AGI, that's an artificial intelligence that can not only learn your preferences, but it can also learn how to play the violin, and can also learn to be a dancer, and can also learn French, right? So it can learn a number of different things instead of being an ANI, which is an artificial narrow intelligence. Now, the idea with the singularity is if it takes us 50 years to create V1 AGI, and then it takes, let's say, 10 years for that V1, the version 1 artificial general intelligence, to make the version 2. And then let's say it takes the version 2 only 2 years to create its version 3. And the version 3 only takes, let's say, 6 months to create the next version of itself that's even better. There's this idea of a singularity where, let's say, version 32 only takes a second and a half to create a better version of itself. And so this is, again, an eventuality. This will happen. Now, there are questions around what does that mean for humanity. Some people say the world's going to end and da-da-da. I'm a little less negative about that. I think we'll find solutions to it. I think the reality is at some point when artificial general intelligence overcomes human capacity and human intelligence, there will be a world where we will merge artificial and biological intelligences into one. And we are already seeing that with human brain interface. We're already seeing that with people using CRISPR to change their genetic code. We've seen that in China, and of course, there's a lot of people that are doing it in many parts of the world that don't tell the world that they're doing it. And so there's this next 50 years is going to be quite interesting. I can't pretend to know exactly how things are going to go, but I can tell you that from my perspective, I think artificial general intelligence will in fact overtake biological intelligence.
Very interesting. And we have more audience response. Mohammed Shoel Rana, he is actually a very active member for WT Forum. Thanks, Mr. Bryan, for your nice discussions. For artificial intelligence has been promising to transform education for our generation. How close are getting and implementing the companies for transforming the education systems? And Jeffrey, he said that it's a interesting discussion. So what's your opinions about that? Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Just to clarify, he's asking how we build the APIs
yes,
or
yes.
the integrations.
How close are getting and implementing the companies for transforming education system? He's talking about the transforming education system.
Yeah, absolutely. It's happening right now. I mean, of course, Ahura, my company, is doing that. We are focused every day on transforming education to enable access to far more people, to enable people to be able to get the education they want. Because look, when massive online open courses, so they're called MOOCs, were created, the idea was that they would provide access to education to anyone in the world. But the challenge is that MOOCs only have a 17% completion rate. So 83% of the people that sign up for an online course, only 17% finish those courses, 83% drop out. And the reason is what we did with MOOCs, with massive online open courses, is we just took the experience of a person in a classroom and we put it online. So we took all of the weaknesses of the one-to-many style, which is a one-size-fits-all approach, and we just put that online. And of course, that's not going to work. And so the future of online learning, the future of learning in general and transformative learning is personalization at scale. And that's happening right now. Ahura AI is on the leading edge of that. There's a number of other companies that are doing fantastic work in that space as well. And so it's coming.
Yes, I think there are more audience response, and you already around 1 hour. Maybe I have to take few more minutes from you. Is that okay? You are in hurry?
Of course. Absolutely.
Okay,
I've got time.
Okay, thank you. So, Butterfly, okay, she said that in addition to Bryan regarding school kids, Montessori school can be a step forward for this change. Okay, this is her opinions. For those, she said that, oh, we have heard about the data explosions and about the need to change the school model. Please tell us about these things, like school models and data explorations, and what your opinions, and someone trying to discuss about Montessori. So anyway.
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. And look, we need to experiment with a lot of different school models. I know many European states are experimenting with not giving homework and focusing on other things. I love the Montessori model, which enables students to be self-directed and go at their own pace and not be just in a clump with a whole bunch of other students. I think that's fantastic. The question, I think, is how do we do that at scale? And so there are many organizations that are rethinking the university experience. They're rethinking elementary school experience. There's a lot of, and I encourage that. I think there should be a lot of experimentation all around the world so that we can actually collect the data and look at, hey, what actually works long term for the human population. And I think we're going to continue doing that both digitally and analog in real life.
Okay, this is very interesting discussions, and beside that, like example, for this kind of things, we need support for education system. I think that government has to be more proactive about this kind of AI and this kind of training. Different corporation, I think already you are working, some NGOs, even different responsible person also, they need to be involved with these ecosystems. So what do you think? How actually the world is moving? Do you think is it enough for getting this kind of changes and with the integrations of AI, like how actually getting your support and what do you think? What
Yeah.
should be the scenario? Yeah.
That's a fantastic question, and I do agree. I think governments and educational systems need to support this kind of work. Now, historically, governments have been very slow to act on technology. Corporations move much more quickly because they have the profit motive, whereas with governments and school systems, since they don't have the profit motive, they have a less of a focus on innovation, and instead, there is an imperative that they don't make mistakes, right? So there's a certain level of caution, because if a government jumps in and does something and it doesn't work out, suddenly politicians will lose their jobs and teachers will lose their jobs and so forth. And so historically, they've been much more slow to act, which is why there's a lot less technology that gets rolled out in education systems. I know in the United States, there's so many decision makers between the school boards and the superintendents, and the governors get involved, and the principals and so forth. And so it makes it very difficult to roll out innovative technologies within the educational space, which means a lot of folks decide to switch over. And look, we initially, when we founded our company, our conception was, hey, we should sell to universities and to governments and help them re-establish or rebuild their entire educational systems. And we found that it's so much easier to sell to corporations because they can move much more quickly, they have greater budgets and so forth. Now, what we're finding in the time of COVID is that has switched, where governments are realizing that, oh no, what we're doing hasn't been working. Entire school systems are struggling in the United States and around the world. And I know in Africa especially, they are, I've been incredibly impressed, because a lot of countries in Africa are saying, look, we skipped over entire layers of infrastructure in telecom, when we skipped over landlines and went directly to mobile phones, in banking, where instead of building brick and mortar banks, they built out all these digital assets, in energy, where instead of building these massive grids, power grids, they were able to create decentralized grids using solar energy and so forth. And so many of the heads of state that I've been speaking with in Africa have been telling me, look, Bryan, we can use your technology to leapfrog traditional infrastructure spend. So instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars building schools and training teachers, we can use decentralized online platforms like yours that personalize education to roll out the technology to our entire populations at a fraction of the price. And so they're learning that. I know in the United States, given all the challenges with COVID, schools and governments, municipalities, states are all looking at the same solution. We're in conversations with quite a few of them, but I know that they're more generally realizing that the internet and technology and AI are their friends, and they can actually solve very real problems by incorporating that. And so I am very hopeful that even though we are in a negative situation with COVID, that as a result, it has caused people to change their thinking and embrace innovative online solutions to the problems that we have.
Okay, this is very meaningful discussions. This is my last question. I want to know how we can build better ecosystem for achieve this kind of objective.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And there's a couple different pieces that you have to take into account, right? So there's the personalization of the content itself. And then as we're building this ecosystem, there has to be an absolute protection of people's data, because the way AI works is you have to suck up a lot of data to then personalize that content. And so you have to have ironclad promises in place, like we do at Ahura AI, that their data won't be used to sell them things or to sell that data to governments and so forth. Or if you do, that the person has full 100% agency to say, hey, this is my data that I'm willing to sell. I don't want to sell this other data. And here are all the organizations I'm willing to sell to, right? If they have full agency, then that's okay. The third component is content, right? So there has to be a wide variety of content. Now, that part is, I think, for the most part, already solved. There's more content available now. There's more content created in the past year than in all of human history combined before that. And so there's more content than any one human would ever be able to consume in 1,000 lifetimes. And so there has to be that content, and a lot of very intelligent, amazing people and organizations are building that content. And the final piece of it, well, there's two more pieces. The next piece is distribution. So the distribution system has to be in place for the ecosystem to work. And the final piece is connecting the final piece from people learning the content, having a hard-coded data around their effectiveness instead of just an A, B, C, D, E score for entire subjects, a very granular understanding of the subject matter that people have expertise in, and then connecting that with AI to employers, to research institutions, to whoever would want to hire those people, to be able to say, hey, here is the list of skill sets that we need, and this is the level of expertise we need, and being able to connect that seamlessly with people all over the world who actually have developed those specific skill sets in a very granular way. And so that final piece, I think, is critical to make sure that there is efficient allocation of human capital and human labor to where it needs to go to optimize for those outcomes that we're looking for.
There is a last question from audience, because I know that you are very busy. So this is from Araf Mehras. He said job automation is a threat that many people are worried about it, and how would this impact in teachers and other professions? So this is the last audience response, so we can take. Okay.
Yeah, so he's right. Job automation is a massive challenge, and my recommendation to you would be to say that it's going to impact you. It's going to impact most people that you know. And so it's critical to upskill and continually learn new skills as new industries come up. Now, with teachers specifically, I think the role of teachers will change over time. I think we're going to continue having teachers because we need to have people that are responsible for the psychosocial development of our children, especially while their parents are working. But the role will shift, whereas instead of being responsible for specifically teaching someone 2 + 2 or teaching people history, that component will likely be done by computers, where if you're in a classroom with 30 students, each student will likely have a laptop in front of them, and the content will be delivered to them in a hyper-personalized way based on their unique needs in that moment around what's going to capture their attention and enable them to learn faster. But the students will still have challenges. They'll still raise their hand and say, hey, I don't understand this section, or hey, I'm frustrated. Or when they're working in groups with other students, there will be challenges that they need to work through. And so teachers will have a role in enabling that and being there with those students to teach them how to interact with other humans, how to interact when they get frustrated, how do they develop what's called EQ, which is emotional quotient, emotional intelligence, which will be absolutely critical moving forward. But the short answer of your question is, look, every job will be impacted, so be prepared. Instead of waiting until your job is replaced by a robot or some kind of AI, I would continually upskill, continually invest a little bit of time every single day, whether it's half an hour or an hour, to constantly learn new skills, so that if anything does happen, or once your job is replaced, that you're ready to take that next step. You don't have to sit there at home and just study for 6 months and try to catch up, because that just will be quite challenging for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Bryan. This is actually a very good discussion, very informative discussion, very good audience response. And thank you, audience, for asking us, for our guest, a very good questions. And hopefully in the future, we will do a lot of policy discussion, policy dialogues and debate. We're going to invite you with our other guests. And hopefully that sessions will be many more interesting, than we can create a better world with the collaborations of your organizations, and hopefully it will be very important for us. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your positive impact and how you tell your personal history. I want to give you a big salute. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I enjoyed all of your questions as well as the questions from the audience. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.